Hey, good morning, everybody. It's John Backetall from Division of Emergency Management. It's 9 a.m. This is the Intrastate Mutual Aid Committee meeting. Today's December 7th and it's 900, so we'll go ahead and get started. Sherry, do you want to see if we have a quorum?
Yes. Voting membership, Chair Jeannie Freeman,
Here.
Roy Anderson, Ron Boyer, Todd Carlini,
Present.
Kyle Sarfoglio,
I'm here instead.
Kelly Echeverria, Mike Heidemann,
Present.
Sam Hicks, Don Pelt,
I'll be representing Don. He's on vacation. I'm Zach Pig with Pyramid Lake Fire.
Matt Peterson, Deb Pierce,
Here.
Ken Kleiner, Billy Samuels,
Present.
Sierra Sampson, James Simpson, Jerome Tushba, Jim Walker.
Here.
We do not have quorum.
I am texting some people right now, and Sierra Sampson is on here. I'm not sure if there's an audio issue. Sierra, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, I stepped away for a second.
No problem. Thank you, ma'am. You guys will just give us a minute here. We'll bother some people and see if they're going to be joining us. Roy, can you unmute yourself and make yourself present? And Quinter's joining as well. Roy, we're going to need an audible from you.
If anyone does not have audible, you can call the conference line on the agenda so that we can get you on record.
We got a chat, right? They can chat as well if they're present.
For the record, Ken Quiner, Washoe Tribes present. Sorry if I'm late.
Thank you, Ken.
We're one short.
Do you mind poking around over there? It's not my phone for some reason. This new phone I lost all in contact.
John, I saw that Washoe EOC got on. Is that Kelly?
Roy, Kelly, can either of you unmute and say you're present?
Roy's present.
Thank you, sir.
James Simpson's present is having connectivity issues.
What was that?
Can you
Oh, thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Okay, we have quorum, our non-voting membership, John Backetall,
Present.
Lenita McGee is not present, Eric Wilson,
Present.
Samantha Laddick is not present today.
Correct.
Okay, we have quorum.
All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you getting on for this. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, public comment. No action may be taken under a matter raised under this item of the agenda until the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda item on which action may be taken. Public comments may be limited to 3 minutes per person at the discretion of the chair. Comments will not be restricted based on viewpoint. We have a little bit of lag with the YouTube channel, so we kind of usually just waste a minute here while we're talking. If you have any public comments, you can put them in the chat. You could email them ahead of time to Sherry so that she can coordinate those. And then we also have the ability for people calling in at 1-669-219-2599 when they're prompted to put in the password and hit pound. So in the room here, do we have any public comment? All right, out in our Zoom land partners, do we have any public comment? All right, hearing none, let's close agenda item number 2, move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes. This is for discussion and possible action. We'll review these quickly through the committee and discuss and review any minutes from June 15th, 2022. The committee will determine whether or not to approve these minutes. So they are part of the outgoing materials that Sherry sent out ahead of time. Again, June 15th, 10 a.m. Meeting was held, got a few pages of minutes here. Anybody have any discussion they want to bring up before we ask for a motion? All right, can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Jeannie Freeman for the record. I make a motion to approve the June 15, 2022 IMAC minutes.
Thank you, Jeannie. Do we have a second?
Jim Walker, I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. We have a first and a second. Do we have any further discussion on the minutes? All right, let's take it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 4. We'll do a quick introduction of our new committee members. So this is just for discussion. I'd like to introduce Roy Anderson from Washoe County School District. He took the place of Mike Wilson, who was on this committee from Clark County School District. Roy, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Roy Anderson. I'm the emergency manager for Washoe County School District. I appreciate the chance and opportunity to be part of this very important group.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate the partnership. Our next new member is Colonel Kyle Cerfolio. He replaced Colonel Constant. Kyle is the new J3 here at the Joint Operations Center with the National Guard and is our partner to go to. He's unavailable in DC. He does have a representative here to take notes and keep him informed of stuff. As you may have heard Sherry represent earlier in this, there are no sit-ins for people on this committee. The member has to be present. And so they can have somebody participate and take the notes, and it is a public meeting, so public comments are always available. And I would never stifle anybody from adding to comments on the agenda as well. So appreciate Colonel Cerfolio taking on this as another committee member. And then we also added Matt Peterson from Elko County Fire Chief, used to be the emergency manager. Matt, have you joined since we started? All right, so Matt's been on several committees with us. Chief Peterson's done a lot of good for us out in Elko and helped change a lot of the mantra in emergency management out there in rural Nevada. So excellent to have him on board. And then we also have our 4th new member, Captain James Simpson from the Nevada State Police. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Jimmy Simpson. I'm captain of the Highway Patrol out of Carson City. My experiences range. I worked rural, urban, and rural again, and now I'm in Carson. So I pretty much know the state all over front and back. So I look forward to serving and doing the best I can do and representing the Highway Patrol and the DPS.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate that. And for those that don't know, we have several highway patrolmen that are already task book credentialed to be individual resources for us. And then we call on them quite often to move things around the state, sometimes in a secure fashion, sometimes just because they have people on the road all the time. So they've been a fantastic resource for us. So take a look at the agenda list that we have. with the current voting membership. We do have a couple positions that are still, one or two positions, right? We have two positions that are still available that we've received applications for and we will be reviewing. So we appreciate those that did respond back and we're able to get letters assigning you to this committee from Chief David Fogerson. So that's it for agenda item number 4. So we'll close that one and we'll move on to agenda item number 5. And this is for the announcement of the new tribal interstate mutual aid system participant. So we have a new partner, and instead of me talking about it, I'll actually have Eric Wilson discuss this on our new membership.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We were able to get the Ely Shoshone tribe to pass a tribal resolution to opt into the IMAC. They became the 6th tribal nation to join, and we're honored to have them and welcome aboard.
Great news. So Sierra, you're one of our tribal partners, so we want to thank you and the tribes that have opted in so that we can continue to use the tribes as a resource and also get them resources quicker by this process. So that's really all we had for agenda item number 5. We'll go ahead and close that and move on to agenda item number 6. This is the bill draft request BDR submission by Nevada, specifically Division of Emergency Management. We're allowed 4 BDRs to submit, and this was one of them. So we want to discuss the submission on the changes of the verbiage for paid personnel versus volunteers under NRS 414-080 number 2 in the intrastate mutual aid system. So when this was first submitted to legislature about 4 years ago, it was brought up that we were looking to start into incident management assistant teams. And with that, having personnel that we can move around the state. Our idea was to create a team in the north and create a team in the south. That way, whichever end of the state was impacted, we would have personnel that we could push to EOCs or EOCs / some field work. And Lenita McGee from our agency has been coordinating this, working on getting people trained, developing policies and procedures with a working group so that we have everything in place to be able to make this happen. And what happened out of the legislature was they submitted their own little word in there and said that the people would be volunteers. And nobody wants to volunteer for a deployment and not get anything out of it. So we have submitted verbiage to change that to stand for the national current trend or standard in reimbursement for equipment and personnel. So when we do have people that we deploy intrastate to support Nevadans, anywhere that may be, then we will be using our intrastate mutual aid forms that Eric has historically submitted. And we will be using the standards for reimbursement for, say, a type 3 engine or a type 6 or an incident command vehicle, whatever that may be. We want to make sure that we're using a standard for reimbursement and it covers all the needs of the agency who put either their personnel or their equipment out in the field. So this is just discussion only. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns about this bill draft request or anything in the intrastate mutual aid system 414A regulations as their statute as it stands now?
John, this is Jeannie Freeman for the record.
Yes.
So using national standards, those standards may not be at the same values as what those pieces of equipment or those people, those other resources cost. So obviously when the request goes in, that information is going to be shared with the jurisdiction that would be deploying those assets, correct? And then they can make that decision as to whether or not they're going to do that deployment.
So John, backing off for the record, that's a great question, and that's exactly right. So those standards tend to be based upon the equipment rate per hour, which is a very lucrative deployment of their equipment. The personnel that are deploying, say, Roy Anderson makes $100 an hour, but the standard to deploy someone in the role he's filling is $52 an hour. Then we would put down what he is requesting to be reimbursed to his agency. And then from there, you're correct. The requesting agency for support gets to either accept or deny or counter the request for what they're willing to reimburse, because they have to follow their jurisdictional rules as to what they're allowed to reimburse.
Okay, follow-up question with that is associated with a lot of times when there's mutual aid that's offered between, neighboring jurisdictions and stuff like that, there are agreements with the amount of time that an asset is deployed without there being a charge to a jurisdiction. Is that going to be something that's going to be incorporated into this for not just pieces of equipment, but people as well?
So John, back it all again for the record, that is correct as well, but we will have that availability, and that happens quite often, especially in Mr. Jimmy Simpson's business. Law enforcement moves people around a lot to support other agencies, as well as our fire partners that are on the phone have a 24-hour mutual aid friends and family agreement for immediate need that they usually do not have a reimbursement process. So it's not going to prevent people from volunteering for a deployment. It's just not going to restrict them to be volunteers only on a deployment.
Okay, and then one last option, sorry, this is Jeannie Freeman for the record. One last thing to take into consideration is, say, for example, by chance, I was somebody who was requested through mutual aid, and that was something that was there. I'm 100% grant funded. So that is not necessarily up to the jurisdiction. I mean, the jurisdiction has some authority over whether or not I can be deployed, but the funding is a very different structure. And so that has some challenges. And there are assets that are around the state that have been purchased with grant funds. And sometimes that's going to be a hiccup on whether or not those assets are deployed in different areas. And so I think that as the BDR is being drafted, I think that that kind of stuff, I would have some conversations with Jared and make sure that there are not any conflicts with CFR 200 or what that may look like for assets, including people who may have their support through grant funding. So for example, like previously when I was the preparedness manager, I was paid for out of preparedness dollars. Well, preparedness dollars do not pay for response. They pay for preparedness. So I get a whole lot of time getting to sit on the sidelines, getting ready for the response, but I don't get to respond necessarily when that request comes in, unless I go through and get special permissions and stuff associated with the grants. And so there are a lot of grant funded staff, particularly people around the state, and that may have some impacts on what those deployments are. So I think it's important as that BDR is being drafted that that's all considered.
So John, back it all again for the record, I appreciate that. What we're going to do with those specific type things is leave them in the policy and procedure and not have them as part of law, so that every time we find a new individual that may be impacted by some sort of rule from the level of government, the private sector they belong to, however they're funded, we don't have to change a rule every time to meet an individual intent. So we'll leave that in the policy and procedure aspect of it. I understand what you're saying. Through most of these type of events and deployments, it is based upon the agency releasing their person and then the agency being reimbursed. And they're reimbursed for the benefits and everything during the time that that individual is gone. So if an agency has an issue with releasing their employee due to what they're going to do versus their funding avenue that they're currently being funded through, a workaround that's available is that employee takes leave and then the employee is reimbursable. There's a number of different things that they will put into the policies and procedures. We just really want to keep the law as limited as possible so it doesn't limit what we're trying to do to support the jurisdiction.
Copy, understood. Thank you.
Is there any other comments, questions, concerns about the bill draft and primarily changing language from volunteer to allowing paid personnel to be deployed and reimbursed? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close agenda item number 6. We'll move on to agenda item number 7. So presentation on real world events, discussion only. Eric Wilson here from DEM. The committee will discuss real world incidents and events occurring from June 2022 through November 2022 for DEM deployed resources to assist local jurisdictions. Mr. Wilson will also provide an update on DEM's efforts to field an incident management assistance team as set forth in 414.
Eric Wilson for the record. There were no deployments from June 2022 through November 2022. And as far as the efforts to field an IMAC team, we developed some MRPs for Hurricane Ian, none of which were selected.
All right.
This is
So-
Jeannie Freeman for the record. I have a quick question. There was an EMAC request related to, I believe, an environmental health team. Was that something that we were able to put together as a state, even if it wasn't selected?
So John, back it all for the record, we received about 300 EMAC requests after Hurricane Ian.
Okay,
And the primary ones that we attempted to fill were for A-team members to be able to assist EMAC processes. So like Nevada has a very small EMAC A-team, and those are the people that submit the requests and into the system, then review them when they come back. It's a very laborious process of paperwork. And so we can deploy them to other states to assist after major disasters. We did submit a few of those. None of those were accepted. We also submitted several individual resources, as well as our Nevada Task Force 1 to be able to go deploy to Hurricane Ian. None of those were accepted. Some of that was due to, it took us a few days to get it together, and other states already had their pre-built packages together. And then other parts were, it's very expensive to bring a team from Nevada to Florida when they have the same resource available in Virginia or Arkansas. And so we did not necessarily do that one, Jeannie. We focused on 2 that we knew we had immediate resources available. They were all kicked to the public out on our listserv and asked if anyone wanted to step up and be a deployable resource. But the 2 that we got feedback from local responders were those 2 mentioned earlier.
copy. So I think one of the things that would be nice is if there's some sort of, I'm sure DEM does this, some sort of tracking as to what type of request came in, you know, like what sort of resources were being requested, because as we look to continue to enhance our depth and enhance our capacity within the state in serving with EMAC and even internally within the state with intrastate, it would be nice to know, because then that might help us prioritize or try to build some capability that maybe we didn't even know would be asked for. And so I know that there's some interest, at least from Carson City Health and Human Services, in relationship to that environmental health group that was asked. But obviously we can't send our entire staff and to understand what those expectations are and stuff. So, I mean, obviously not something that happens in the next 6 months, but something that does allow us, at least, I'd like to see something like that come back to the IMAC as to the types of resources that were requested, just to kind of give us an idea of what that might look like. Granted, we won't have a hurricane here, but even if there are requests that come in from earthquakes around the world or something like that, it just kind of gives us a better understanding of what we can do to build our capacity so that we even can respond locally when something happens, because sometimes we don't always know what we need until we see somebody else need it.
So John, back it all for the record, great point, and it leads into agenda item number 8. We're going to be discussing some of that, and so thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody have any further discussion on the requirements that we discussed, the real world event deployments, if there were any, and then anything further on the incident management team developments?
Hey, John, this is Billy Samuels.
Yes, sir.
A couple things. We did send some dogs and IST out to Hurricane Ian from Nevada Task Force. You guys probably didn't have eyes on those because they're such a small package. But I can give you those notes to let you know what their duties were and when their assignments were. We also have a member that actually lives in California, but is part of Nevada Task Force, one that we send out pretty frequently. And again, you guys may not have eyes on that, but I can keep you updated as well. One thing that I would like to see is, we were trying to muster up 5 engine companies, type 1s, to get sent out to Florida. The cost was expensive, but it seemed like they may have paid it. It'd be nice to see if we can get a way for that transportation, that ESF1 and logs work together to get, how do we transport those type of equipment out there? Us driving a fire engine at 3 miles to the gallon all the way to Florida is probably unrealistic, but if we can truck it or use a railway system, I think that's something that if this group can get together, that might be, give us some avenues like Dr. Freeman was just talking about regarding those assets that people are asking. We don't really use a lot of them here, but we do have the capability to help people other ways. It's just a long travel time. So if this group can work on that, that'd be great.
Thank you, John Backendall, for the record. Appreciate that comment, and I will take some of that as well and reach out to the states that did send their resources and find out how they sent them. That way we can analyze that and use it for a basis on what we could do moving forward for a quicker travel response time. Anything else from anybody on this agenda item? All right, let's close agenda item number 7, move on to agenda item number 8. Interstate mutual aid system mission ready packages, and MRPs is what we call those. So Eric Wilson will discuss this with you guys, and we want to go over what they are, how we use them as a Nevada resource, as through the interstate mutual aid system, which also ties into the IMAC deployment of these, and how we would like to stand some of these up. So Eric.
Eric Wilson for the record. The discussion that we had on the IMAC MRPs stirred more discussion here about having possible MRPs for interstate use as well as out-of-state use. When we started looking at that, it made sense to have those as well. And if you don't know what a mission-ready package is, it's basically a specific response and recovery capability that are organized, developed, trained, and usually they're exercised before they're deployed. They're good because they accelerate the mutual aid process, they speed it up, they make it more efficient. And they usually, if they're in the MASS system, which is the system which has all the MRPs listed for IMAC, it's a one-stop shop. You can go in there and search in one place. So it makes it a lot easier for that as well. We wouldn't be able to use the MASS system for IMAC. We would have to we make up our own system. We have smart sheets that we would probably use. We would use the IMAS reimbursement packages that were approved earlier by this group to figure out the costs so that it would be easy to be able to estimate the cost. It's usually on a 2-week deployment that the costs are estimated on. If you look in the package that for the meeting, there is some sheets there for an IMAC MRP. And this is one that we recently just submitted for the Governor's Energy Office, the GOE. And if you go through here, there's basic information that needs to be listed in there. It would basically be the same information that would be for IMAS. On item 13 on page 2 is where the deployment timeline is. And the standard is either 7 days or 14 days. And what the system does is that it calculates it. And we could do that as well on Smartsheet so that it would be able to easily calculate an estimated cost. When we were talking to the IMAC representative, he said that it would be best to not fill in the travel costs. Those aren't known and it's easy to put in once you figure out where the person is going if you're using per diem rates. We do have the cost in here for the equipment, and we also have the cost for the personnel itself. This one is for a liquid fuel shortage specialist. So it's for one personnel and associated equipment and commodities. And the equipment total is $2,300. And the daily total for deployment of the individual is $1,836.80. So they can take that and then take the travel sheet, put in the per diem costs on there and be able to estimate the costs out very easily. Now, we wouldn't use this MRP. This is just an example of the IMAC information. We would use the IMAS paperwork, but the result would be the same. We could put the MRPs, interstate MRPs on a smart sheet that would be available to everyone to view. And we just thought that would be a great idea to have interstate to speed up mutual aid. And I just wanted to throw it out to the group there, what they thought about it. And if they agree, what MRPs they think is most important or necessary.
Thank you, Eric. So to pose a question to you guys, to do this, we're going to need an understanding of what type of resources you needed in the past so that we could request through this group to develop the mission ready package. You wouldn't have to do the work, that's Eric's job, but the insight and the information and the advocacy from this group to direct us on what we're going to need to be better prepared in the state of Nevada. We want to be able to have these available not only for IMAC, but for the interstate mutual aid system. So if anybody has any ideas right now, or you want to think about it, and we can continue to discuss this on this agenda to develop MRPs and have a better preparedness stature in the state of Nevada.
Hey, John, this is Billy Samuel. Sorry to get on again, but the MRPs, that's something that FEMA is going towards a lot now. Instead of sending a whole type 1 or type 3 packages out there, they like those mission ready packages, whether they're just boats or dogs or logs or whatever. So instead of sending out 80 some people for us for our type 1s, or even almost 40 for our type 3s, those 16-person MRPs are probably becoming a little more prevalent that I think we're gonna be seeing in the future just due to cost. So I think that's something that, if that's where this group wants to go, I think that's something that needs to be explored a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's John backing off of the record that if you guys know that there's an issue with the type of large formats that have been requested in the past, and we offer a smaller package and give explanation why, especially in Nevada, it definitely makes a lot more sense. So thanking Public Works, law enforcement, fire, all of that kind of stuff, EMS, personnel to work, whatever you can think of. When we look at the impacts, Nye County, the tribal land in Southern Nevada and Malapa Reservation, both of those two have had severe floodings multiple times this year. And if they needed resources, that if it wasn't an NDOT state route, or NDOT was busy with their own stuff and was not able to assist the local government, then how could we look at getting Eureka or Lincoln or Clark or whatever to move public works equipment? So if it was set up to be, you know, a type 1 grader, a type 1 dozer, a type 1 front loader, and then multiple type 1 dump trucks, that type of stuff to pre-build a public works package for flood recovery across county roadways or tribal roadways. Think outside the box. This is where we want to do some of that innovative and creative processes to be better prepared for the hazards we've had in Nevada and try to have something ready so we can respond quicker. That's the whole point of this. There's no homework. Nobody's going to be assigned anything. Just really looking for you guys as SMEs and gals to give us feedback, and we will do the legwork to develop these packages by talking to the SMEs in the field on, hey, what's it going to cost to deploy 3 vets because there's an outbreak of something in Elko? So whatever it may be. So start thinking about it and definitely talk amongst your own little groups of your specialty and your friends, and come back to us with some ideas. It doesn't need to come through this meeting. Please feel free to email Eric and say, I've got some ideas on what we should be developing for Nevada because of this and that and the next thing. And this could be stuff that we continue to discuss in those workshops in the fall as well, as we take out a bunch of the stuff we did last year. This is directly related to our THIRA, our planning that we're doing, and now we're having those packages designed and developed ahead of time to be better stewards of the state in our time of need.
John, this is Jeannie Freeman. This is Jeannie Freeman for the record. So when you think of a mission ready package, are you thinking of a package that's put together that may have pieces from a variety of different counties? Because I don't know that any particular county, regardless of their size, has the ability to deploy all those assets out of their county and not have that available for 2 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And John, again, for the record, it absolutely can be a task force of different resources. Or it could be a strike team from different groups, like say Quad County. Each one wants to throw 1 apparatus in and one's going to throw 2 in, and now we have 5, or we have a short strike team of only 4. Whatever that is, then that's what we develop and we put in there. But another jurisdiction can see the cost of what that's going to be. And if they're going to be on hook for 25% or 50% if it doesn't elevate to a federal deck, and they want to apply for state money and they only get 50% of that back, it really helps them identify what their costs are going to be, so they can go quickly to their commission or their council and say, hey, this is going to cost us 30 grand. Is this what we want to do? And that's the importance to this, is to get a much more rapid, effective, and efficient response to those in their time of need.
And I think that, just as a follow-up, Jeannie Freeman for the record, I think that also helps some of our electeds understand the importance of mitigation and some of the things that we keep trying to fight against, you know, when they say, well, this doesn't happen here that frequently, or something of that sort, that, well, there are things that we can do to maybe prevent it from happening to such a severity that costs astronomical amounts of money when we don't necessarily have that on any given one point in time. So I think it may just help provide some of that conversation piece too with our electeds.
Agreed. Anybody else got anything they want to add to this? Sam Hicks, I saw you had joined. Thank you for joining. Can you just say you're here for us and we can add you to the roster? If you're still sitting there, we're gonna need you to unmute, that's all. Sam, are you here?
I am, John. How are you today?
Very good, thank you, sir. I wanted to make sure you got accounted for on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I had some connection links problems this morning.
It sounds like half of us. Anything you want to add to this, since you run teams and you deploy resources anywhere? Anything you want to share with the group on mission ready packages or anything like that, sir?
No, I sat on a tasking this year. They're going to change the configuration of incident management teams to go complex incident management. And the big thing that we're seeing is right sizing organizations for whatever the agency need is. You know, is it type 3 incident that only needs a few key specific people? Or, you know, is it a large mega million incident that needs a lot of people? So I think agencies are really trying to only request what they really need, partly because of cost and then mob time. And then that also frees up other folks to respond elsewhere in the nation. So that's kind of what I've seen so far. We did talk about that MRB process, or the pod process, I guess, and how we would deploy that. One of our questions that came up is who's going to manage that pod of logistics folks or plans folks? Who's going to make sure they're ready to go and kind of keep be their keeper of that group, so that when they do get called up for flooding or whatever, they get rolled out. Would that go back to you guys, John?
That's a great question, because currently FEMA is the only people with those type of resources, because they tend to deploy on national disasters all around the country, especially in these remote islands. And they've been very good at making sure they have those logistics specialists, and all they do is manage that team. And we do not have a resource like that. We would have to contract that out, similar to like we did when COVID started. We brought in a number of the incident management team logs people to help us get started with that. And then as we caught our groove, we turned it to National Guard and had them be our logistics folks moving forward. So we just don't have, with as small of an agency we are, the personnel to do that.
Yeah, and I think that would be it's a huge tasking to make sure that you're keeping track of those resources that are available, and then once they're deployed, and then reassigning or whatever. That's a daunting task, I think.
Agreed. Thank you for the input and insight. Anybody else got anything to add on mission ready packages, information they want to share?
Hey, John, Matt Peterson for the record.
Yes, sir.
That way you got me on your roster as well. So something with mission ready packages that we identified during COVID, and you and Chief Samuels and myself kind of started in on this, of kind of doing an in-briefing packet for oncoming resources of the lay of the land, logistics, expectations, and things like that. I think that's a pretty critical piece of the mission ready package. I'm sure Sam could attest, when you're showing up in someone else's backyard, knowing the lay of the land and what the expectations, and those in-briefing packets are pretty critical. I have a template that I'm working on that we can send out to each and every county, and they could break it down from jurisdiction beyond that, where that mission ready package and that in brief will set responding resources, or if they're coming for a specific incident up for success.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. We'd love to see your product and not reinvent the wheel and steal a best practice. So thank you. Right, last call. Anybody else? All right, we'll close agenda item number 8. Appreciate the discussion on that. Or I'm sorry, yeah, agenda item number 8. We'll continue to discuss this through this meeting. Any mission ready packages you guys have, please submit that to Eric. Or ideas. And then we'll go to agenda item number 9. This is public comment again. So again, no action may be taken until we get it on the agenda. And got a minimum 3 or maximum of 3 minutes at the discretion, and no viewpoint will be suppressed. Anybody got anything in the room they want to add? Nothing in the room. Any final comments online? Any public comment anybody wants to add? Anything else from anybody? We're pausing here while we're waiting for Zoom and YouTube and all the things to catch up. All right, I appreciate everybody's time. We'll get some minutes out on this here pretty soon. We'll schedule the next meeting for early next year to meet again some regulatory needs that we have, but then also to manage this type of agenda items with the mission ready packages, and making sure we're covering the information as we're in the legislative cycle as to where we're at, what things have done moving forward. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. Have a happy holiday season. Take care.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Eric.
Bye, everybody.